Hi all, welcome. This is Benno Overeender. We'll wait for a couple of minutes for people to join. I still expect a number of people in the room to join. Hi Jim. No, I was still waiting. Can you hear me? Okay, excellent. We'll start in a minute. Yeah, waiting for people to join. Okay, excellent. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone. Okay, I see almost all names that give their availability on the poll, on the doodle poll, also here in the room. So let's get started. Welcome to the DNSOP interim meeting. Well, there was one main topic on the agenda, the Dns Terminology. We come to that. First, let's open the session, the DNSOP work interim meeting. Right, so welcome. So the chairs, that's myself, Benno, Tim Wyszynski, Suzanne Wolf. Our AD, Warren, is also here in the room, available. We have Twitter, we have Jabber here integrated in Meet Echo, and the minutes will be placed on notes on the IETF notes website here. The link follows below. Good. As this is an IETF meeting, we all expect that you are aware of the note well and you understand what it says. Part of a note well is the code of conduct guidelines. Won't repeat everything here, but these are the 6 highlights of the guidelines. And well, summarizing, treat each other with respect in your discussion and email exchange. Thanks. We take this seriously. The agenda. So on the agenda is Dns Terminology. More specific, I will go over a number of discussion points we had in the past on the mailing list and at the IETF meeting last year. I propose that I will go over the slides in one go, and then we go back to the slides and then per slide we discuss what, well, to clarify, to get some consensus. So Paul and Fujiwara-san can work on their draft and made a second iteration, or the next iteration, sorry, not the second, a next iteration of the document, and work towards consensus and working group last call. Not on the agenda, but if time permits, we can have time for an informal chat on alt TLD. We didn't put it on agenda because during the time we did the poll on availability, it was not agenda. So just to be clear on that, so we wouldn't put it later on the agenda and then people see that, well, they couldn't express their availability if they want to discuss this issue. But still, we think it's, if there's time again, it's good that we have some time for informal chat to clarify a number of issues. And of course, everything goes to the mailing list or to a separate interim meeting, or maybe during the IETF. But that's also up to the working group, of course. Well, a lot of introduction. Maybe Warren, do you want to? Did I forget something here? As one of the authors, not as the AD, but one of the authors of the draft.
Nope, I don't think so. I guess we'll just get through the main agenda. And
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
Let's go. So, any questions before I continue? Any questions on the agenda here? Clarification. So the process is I go over the slides. Maybe for clarifying question, that's fine. But for the discussion, I go once over the slides and I go back to the first slide, and then we discuss in depth, well, the slide and finding consensus. If that's all clear, I'll go back to the chat. Is there something? No. Okay. Excellent. Good. So the Dns terminology. So for this draft to make progress, there are two things actually related. It's the definition of bailiwick. There's a lot of discussion has been last year on the bailiwick definition, and related, of course, the definition of glue. And in that respect, that's also relevant for glue not optional draft, because if we can finish the definition here for this for the Dns terminology, also that draft can go further and maybe towards working group last call. I think there's a lot of, what I've seen on the mailing list, a lot of consensus. Good. The definition of bailiwick, again, I go over the slides and then we can discuss it in detail later. So the number of proposals. So there's a definition of bailiwick from the document, from the current draft, and that goes into in domain, sibling domain, and out of bailiwick. But also on the mailing list, there was a suggestion to drop the whole term in bailiwick because it was ambiguous and convoluted. Again, yeah. So should we go back to only use in domain and sibling, which are more specific, and forget about this term? We come back to this later. So the next slide, or the next thing. So what's the scope of use of bailiwick? Is it strict? I use it, the word strict, maybe there are better words here. But do we only use it for, well, needed for DNS resolution, as we currently understand it, at least a group of us? Yeah, so only the quad A records. Or should we also extend it, or the newer interpretation, as Paul Wouters also put it in the mailing list, the newer interpretation of bailiwick? Does it also include DNSSEC records, record types, or SVCB? That's a discussion issue point. And now back to the definition of glue. I took this definition of glue from the mailing list. Credits to Dwayne. Well, you can all read it out yourself. Important here is this follow-up discussion here is that the use of necessary for resolution versus useful for resolution to proceed. That's a discussion started by Ben Schwartz. Well, the discussion was, is that too broad, ambiguous, and or etc. Should we make the term more specific for glue for in-domain, sibling domain, as the term is used in the draft glue, not optional, to align this as a discussion thing. Yeah, I think definition of sibling glue. This is a term used by, this definition was used by Tony Finch. But again, here it's a follow-up discussion, same as for the domain in-domain glue, or the what's called the glue for in-domain name server, or in-domain name servers. Strict. It's only used to find the name server, or is it more? More a broaden up, a more wider interpretation that it helps or optimizes some process. It's John Levine also made some comments on this. So these were the slides. If people miss a topic that should be discussed today, please raise your hand. You get some time, and then we go over the slides. Okay, check the chat. Okay, don't see anything. No hands raised? No? Okay. Paul, please.
Hi, there we go.
Hi,
So,
Paul. Yeah.
hi. One of the things, remember that this is for 8499 BIS,
Sorry.
which
Yeah.
is, so it's a BIS document on an earlier terminology document. One of the things that Kazunori and I have struggled with is definitions that are from the original documents that everyone has known for a while versus things that change. And so Benno did a good job of pointing out some of the things that have changed, and we don't know. And one of the reasons why I think that there is a disagreement in the working group, and I, by the way, I strictly do not have an opinion on how this should go. But one of the things that's important for us to say here, so we can say in the document, is, are we trying to interpret the original documents just as they are? Are we trying to, meaning for this definition or these definitions, because we're now talking both definitions of sibling, of bailiwick and of glue, or are we coming up with new definitions based on the way the DNS has changed? And I can see the working group going either one way or the other. We shouldn't go halfway, so that when Kazunori and I are writing in, because this section, the section on bailiwick is already reasonably long for something that was supposed that, sort of had a throwaway definition in the early documents. But we should be able, Kazunori and I should be able to say, this definition in here is based only on the old view, or this definition is based on the emerging view. So I would like, as we're discussing this, that people also choose which, do we want to do it, which way that we want to do that, so that Kazunori and I can actually say that in the document for this definition. We have some other definitions in the document that were uncontroversial, that had sort of a new flavor to them and such. But the working group has gotten really tied on this one. So we want to say, why do we have the particular definition that we're going to end up with? So please don't forget that when you're thinking about what should the eventual definitions be. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for the context and you need this more and the specific question to the working group. Yeah. So let's go to the first slide, the definition of bailiwick. So there, here again, this is the definition. So it's as Paul referred to the RFC 8499 BIS document. The definition of in bailiwick, of bailiwick and in bailiwick, in the current draft is that it specifies in domain, sibling domain, and the out of bailiwick, what's called in English antithesis, not something, well, something different than that, but also maybe just, I think this is an important thing, so we can we can decide on this. Or should we drop the term in bailiwick as suggested and only use the more specifics in domain and sibling domain? And the question behind that also is, do we need today the term bailiwick and in bailiwick? I'd like to open the floor here for comments. Warren.
So this is Warren. I think that one of the uses of this document is for people who are trying to understand other documents and sort of figure out what exactly something means when they read a document. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to completely drop the definition. It might be worth having some sort of, somewhat imprecise or hand-wavy definition with a note that this is a term which we try not to use anymore. But if you're coming across it because you're reading it on some web page or sort of blog or somebody mumbled it in passing, you at least have some idea of what it might mean. So sort of not actually a specific formal definition, but more of a like, this is so you can understand what the hell's going on. Just a thought.
Yeah. Any other suggestions, ideas? So summarizing, I think that was also during one of the IETF meetings, I think, indeed document the terms we have used in the past, and also reiterating or repeating Warren, there might be some hand waving inaccurate, but this is our interpretation, how it was used in the past, and then come with the more specific, using the little bit more specific terms to make it, to define the bailiwick and in bailiwick term. Paul.
This is actually a question for Warren. Warren, were you saying that we should, in this document, describe what we thought bailiwick was before and then hand wave about it might have changed? Or were you saying that we shouldn't even try to describe what it was and hand wave and say it's been used before, but we're not defining it here because it has changed so much over time and there's no there's no single definition? I'd be happy with either, but I wanted to sort of hear more where you were going with that. Thanks.
No, what I was meaning is this term is not hugely well defined, but if you have found it in a document or a discussion, this is sort of what it means. So, it doesn't need to be a perfectly precise definition, but a not quite Hitchhiker's Guide overview, but you saw this term, you wanted to know what it probably meant. It's hard to define, but here are some pointers, advice, etc., to sort of grok the general meaning. With maybe a note that we, assuming that that's the working group consensus, a note that we try to avoid it in future. Basically, sort of a helpful thing for people who are trying to understand what the hell this whole DNS thing actually is, so they can read it and go, oh, okay, I understand this definition isn't perfect, but at least I now have some vague understanding. So the sentence that, Andrew made last week kind of makes sense.
Yep.
Did that actually answer your question, or did I answer something completely different?
That helped. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. I thought John Levine raised his hand. Please go ahead, John.
I did. I would agree with Mark, but make it slightly more emphatic and just say this term has been used ambiguously. Sometimes it means in zone, sometimes it's sibling zone. Why we don't use it?
Okay.
It's going to be helpful in reality.
Okay, John, I couldn't hear everything because at my receiving end it was a little bit intermittent, but if I can summarize your comment, is that you agree with Warren's comment that it clarifies how we used it in the past, and something else maybe I forgot to mention, but did other people hear John correctly? Because I about half was missing on my end.
So John was saying,
Okay.
don't try to define it now.
Yeah.
So we don't define bailiwick then, is
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. I think we summarized John's comment correctly. Don't try to define it now. Indeed. Yeah. I think that's also yeah. Back to Paul. Yeah. Okay. I was just about to ask you to comment on this, or
Yes.
if this is good input for you. Yeah.
Well, it is, although it is different than what Warren said. So I'm hearing two things now, and
Mhm.
you know, again, we're going to have to do this on the list. But one
Okay.
is Warren's say that it was, you know, that a, you know, it's been used this way before with this sort of definition, but it might be different now. And John's, which I think is easier for Kazunori and I, which is to not define it at all, to say it's been used, but now we don't really know what it means. So we're not going to try to confuse you with a definition. There might be a space between those two that says
Okay.
it's been used in the past in the area of where do these records live and which records are we talking about.
Yeah.
But we don't really know that anymore without going into why, because if we go into why, then it's going to look like, you know, oh, what about these other records? And,
Yeah.
you know, quite frankly, 2 years ago, we didn't have SVCB. And so the people are like, that should be glue, or that should be, you know, part of Bailiwick.
Mhm.
That didn't even exist. So I'm fine with either of those. Like I say, it'll be easier for Kazunori and I if we don't even have to do a half definition. But maybe a half definition is okay. The shorter, the better. So.
Okay. Jim, I saw your hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Benno. I kind of agree with what Paul's just said. If the sense of this particular session is we're going to drop the term in bailiwick, I think we have to have something in the document that explicitly says we have chosen not to define this term in this definitions document, and give the rationale why we've chosen not to give that definition. That seems to me the middle way, which kind of fits between the two proposals that we've been discussing earlier today. It seems very strange to me that we would have a definitions document that was not mentioned in bailiwick at all, even if it's only to say is we no longer think it's appropriate to define this in modern DNS terminology.
Yeah. Indeed. Tim, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, Jim, and I think that's pretty much what Warren was saying. We can take it out of the more stricter definition is what we could do, and then make a note that this is a historical thing and it's a very ambiguous term. Yes, we would not drop it, but we would not try to define it more strictly, I believe, is what the end result would be.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I was also interpreting the same way as Tim, but yeah. Warren and Tim are still, well, if you want to mic, Warren first and then Jim.
Yep. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think some of it comes down to what we think the purpose of the document is. And is it strictly when I'm writing an RFC or draft or whatever, and I want to be able to refer to terms, I can just say, you know, this document uses the term in bailiwick, you know, as an example, as defined in blah, blah, blah. Or do we want it to also be a I'd like to understand this DNS thing more, and I
Yep.
come across a set of terms I don't really understand what they mean. I personally think that and that can also then be used for the first purpose as well. I personally think it would be really useful to have a means for sort of newcomers, etc., to be able to look somewhere and understand what terms mean. But I think that's also because I would still really like us to have a Hitchhiker's Guide to the DNS type document, which I understand we're unlikely to have because it's a monster big undertaking. But I think also often a lot less formal than others. I think, documents should be friendly and approachable, and that's not always the best answer.
Okay, thank you. So back to Paul for this slide. Do you still have questions to the working group?
I'm sort of assuming that the questions for the working group are to come from the chairs, since you're the ones who have to.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. So given the sorry.
Consensus on what Kazunori and I ask, that's much more difficult than you determining consensus on what you ask. So
yeah,
I think we know certainly for here what the parameters are, but I would like those questions to come from y'all. Just so that you'll be able to interpret the answers better.
Tim.
And Kazunori, please jump in if you disagree with me on any of this, how it goes into the document stuff. I'm sort of trying to make our lives easier. And I know that means shifting this on the chair, but sort of once you get into consensus differences, in my mind, that's where the chairs step in. And that we become more editors, not authors.
Yeah. Okay. So Tim. Sorry. First Tim, and then I try to summarize. But maybe Tim has.
Yes, that's what I was going to try to do here, Paul. Was try to summarize. So it sounds like the question we'll be asking is, we'll pull this more formal definition of bailiwick out, and you would write some text about it being a historical term that's a bit ambiguous. Correct?
Get to ask the question, so don't ask me if it's correct. This is among the chairs of how the question should go.
That's what I'm hearing. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing the right stuff. That's all.
Yeah. But ask it in a way that you feel that you'll be able to get consensus best.
Yeah. Okay, clear. So this is also the question I. So thanks, Tim. So just before I go further in managing expectations, so the thing is that this question will be sent to the mailing list. Paul, is that correct? Maybe I'm a little bit fuzzy here. Sorry if I'm too fuzzy, but just for clarity.
Yeah. Any consensus call has to go to the list.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, we go to the next slide. The scope of use of bailiwick has been also on the mailing list a discussion. Is it strictly? It's a strict use of to resolve a name, to get to the name servers. So is are the A or the quad A resource record types, or do we also consider what is necessary for DNSSEC validation? So DNSSEC RR types or SVCB. What does the working group think? So Paul.
This directly goes back to the question of old versus current. And again, I would hope that there'll be a separate consensus call for do we want to do old versus current. Because if it does go, and I have a preference for us not doing this at all, because if it goes towards current, then it's always going to have to be in the future as well. Again, we didn't predict SVCB, But DNSSEC is a very interesting question. Is a validating resolver needs some things for DNS resolution, and going to Warren's question of, well, what would somebody who sees the term bailiwick think, need to know when they are reading it? This calls into question which document, when was the document that is using the term bailiwick written? So I would hope we could sidestep all of this by saying it's, by saying both it's a historic term, but it's also a historic term that changed over time without describing how it changed over time. Because some people would say, well, DNSSEC is not needed, but SVCB is, because that's how, like, literally these days, half of the addresses for websites are being discovered, even though we don't even have an RFC yet. So my preference would be for us to do less here. But again, Kazunori and I will do whatever working group comes to consensus on. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Dwayne, please go ahead. You're unmuted, but can't hear you yet. Okay, maybe I'll look to... Okay, Dwayne will use chat and wait for a minute. The question is, okay, is this slide
Yes, Dwayne, I think
really
it
about
is.
the use of glue? Yeah.
Looking at the definitions, yes, I think there's a thing about strict use of glue. So that maybe you're...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. That's correct.
I have a question for Dwayne, though, if that's okay. Kazunori had said in the chat, I kind of agree with him that some of these terms, that especially bailiwick and in domain, or needed for the glue is not optional draft. And I'd like to hear what the authors have to say on that.
Okay.
So that would be best if we actually have some definitions. Yes, exactly. Yes, they would be defined here, and we should make sure that we find stuff that you need here. And Mr. Kazunori said, bailiwick, in domain, and sibling are necessary for your draft. I believe he is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe, okay, so we go actually to the next slide. So maybe this, well, okay. Please, Paul, you first, go ahead.
So if we are needing, if these definitions are going to be feeding directly into the glue is not optional draft. So remember, this document is sort of defining things, helping people read and such. Glue is not optional is a specification for how resolvers and authoritative servers are going to work. Therefore, to me, in my mind, that takes precedence over our hand waving. Thus, Dwayne, if you want definitions for your document in 8499 BIS, I would very much want to make sure that during the consensus discussion from the chairs that you specify what level of definition is needed for your document. Because I agree it would be best if you didn't define it in your document. But if that puts the onus on us to define it, we'd better get it right for your document. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, Paul. And I thought Dwayne had dropped one of those especially the in-domain one. But
Yep.
So
the referral. So the referral was dropped, if I'm correct, and well, I'm jumping to the next slide. Sorry. So I think from revision 3 to 4, not sure that's correct, or 2 to 3. It's used now. Referral has been dropped to glue for in-domain / sibling domain name server. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to try, Dwayne?
Because on the mailing list it was okay. Yeah.
Okay, you just had your hand raised. I was
okay.
wondering.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, going back to this slide, that might be indeed a little bit also. Well, here's Bellingwick and glue discussion going. Well, falls together. So maybe it's better to go to the next slide, and it gives the answers also to the questions raised here, if nobody objects. No? Okay, so the definition of glue, I took this from the mailing list from Dwayne. So there was from quite a number of people agreement with small amendments, so small changes. So you should mention this also, but agree with the definition. And there was a follow-up discussion between, well, what's exactly necessary for resolution to proceed and what's useful. And that also comes back to the previous discussion we had on, is it strictly on, well, the A records, A record types, or additional information. But I interpreted the first one a little bit broader than this one. So that's why I made 2 different slides. But so first of all is, I think the second bullet point is the one for discussion here. How strict, or do we want to have the definition of glue, so the necessary one, or the more modern interpretation useful? And then also it includes maybe other resource record types than A and quad A. So not completely repeating the discussion. So there's the old definition and maybe the modern or the new definition discussion. Again, here, who wants to speak up, has something to add on this slide or discuss or disagree? Tim?
Yeah. So I believe if we go for the broader definition, we'll have to do some clarifying text with 2181. That seems to be the bigger piece in the discussion there about the glue records, which is okay because this document can update older documents, and that's happened in the past. So we'll just want to sort of think that through, and it'd be great to hear from folks what they think one way or the other.
Okay, looking at the chat for a moment. Okay, yeah, okay. Sorry. Paul, please go ahead.
So instead of updating 2181, we could also do the, this is not, I'm more hesitant to call glue a historic term, but we could say the definition of glue has changed over time as well. Yeah. And I know this is hard, but I think that it is, going back to Warren's desire that, and this is the same desire that we've had since the beginning of, that this document should be useful to readers who are not currently, who are seeing something about the DNS, that they don't understand, and they remember that there's this terminology document. Them coming and us saying, here is what glue meant, you know, in the Paleolithic era, and it might not mean that to everybody now, to me would be better than actually updating 2181. You know, to say other people, you know, and because I think it is safe to say, you know, we don't have Mark Andrews on the call, but I think it's safe to say there, you know, there is disagreement currently, you know, because and I hate to speak for Mark, especially because we disagree on lots of things, but I'm using Mark as an archetype of always go to the original definitions. I mean, I could say the same thing about Paul Vixie as well. And there are plenty of developers who would say, no, we have to move with the time. It's no longer 1989. So I think we can say something like that without updating 2181. But it might take a few rounds on the list. But again, there would need to be consensus on how we would do that as well. And again, this specifically goes much more towards the glue is not optional document, which again is specifying how things should act. It needs to know what things need to be omitted in, you know, when, because glue is not optional. So that definition will have a very strong effect on this new document, which again, in my mind, is somewhat more important than 8499 bis, you know, because it is saying how things should act.
Yeah. So, okay, let's check. So it's unfortunate Dwayne can't speak. Just give it a try. Dwayne?
Check.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so this was a long time ago, and I'm trying to remember a lot of this discussion that happened. I'm glad I went through and you know, looked at the old messages. But you know, one thing Paul touched on, I think is important. This definition doesn't say which RR types are considered glue, but that might be something that we would need. You know, there might need to be like a registry or something like that, because if you go with this broad definition and these other RR types become considered to be glue, then it does affect you know, how name servers would behave given the glue is not optional draft, and it could, you know, it could affect things like response sizes and whatnot. So you know, my inclination is to proceed with the narrower definition for now, because at this point we really only do have the two, you know, A and quad A records that are treated as glue, and till such a time that there are other record types that should be treated as glue, we shouldn't. I don't think we should have the broader definition just yet.
Yeah. Thank you, Dwayne. Yeah, and I was thinking, well, we have the kind of the historical, the historic definition of glue, and the two more specific definitions, as you use that also in the draft glue is not optional, the glue for in-domain and the glue for sibling domain name servers. But that won't solve the problem here. You rather, sorry. So it's better to have, well, also the historical interpretation to be strict on A quad A. It's a little bit maybe the same discussion as we had for the in Bellingwick. What do we want to do for the future? So I hear one suggestion from Dwayne. Let's stick to for now, on the more strict interpretation, A and quad A. And for the future, if we need a broader definition, we also need a registry to specify these resource record types. Sorry. Is that the correct summary?
Yes, I think that is correct. And okay. And Kazunori put something in chat about I believe he's been looking at Dwayne's draft where he says in-domain glue is necessary, sibling glue is optional, and out of bailiwick glue should be ignored. And I believe that's along the lines of the definitions.
Yeah. Dwayne, please, if you have something to add. Yeah.
Yeah, your summary matches my what I intended as well. I do think though that we should be clear, because I think we might be talking about two slightly separate things here. You know, one of them being what is the list of RR types that are glue. The other being should this definition use the word necessary or useful. I think those are subtly different, because you know, for example, like Cousin Ori was just saying, sipping glue is still glue, but it's not strictly necessary. It's more, it falls more into the useful side. So maybe we want to have the discussion about necessary versus useful with the group.
Yep.
And I think the proponent of the person who really was in favor of, I forget which one I suggested originally. I think I suggested useful, and maybe somebody else suggested necessary.
Yeah, you were
Ben,
necessary.
maybe. I think he's not here today.
Yeah.
But,
no, yeah, I did reread the mail thread. So the original definition came with necessary, and Ben Schwartz proposed useful for the little bit broader definition. Yeah. To include also, for example, well, other resource record types. Or not, no, sorry, not other, but also for a broader interpretation, what might be useful in the resolution process, and not strictly necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, it's correct. This was not about resource record types. Yeah, you're correct. So yeah, and I think, well, maybe someone else should speak up now about the not about the resource record type, but about strictness of what's the necessary versus useful discussion on the mailing list. I think John Levine also made some comments in an earlier thread about two options, and I think that was a little bit similar discussion about how broad this was. Let's go to the mailing.
Benno, I think this is Tim. I think
yeah.
Dwayne used the term necessary, and I believe useful is folks, you know, I think many folks see something like Service B records becoming glue in the future, but we're not there yet, right? And we haven't actually hashed all that out, and that's going to take some time. And I feel probably the definition, and this will be one of those questions, is the definition will probably initially now necessary, forward thinking for useful.
Yeah. Let's see what Ben. Okay. Yeah. So for us, it's now we need to forward this question to the mailing list. We have sufficient input from the working group now. Question. I think so. I think we have. Okay. Paul?
So I'm a little bit concerned about what Tim just put in the comments about SVCB in the future. If we believe that, and we might, I mean, I'm not saying it's not true, but if we believe that, the wording in this document is going to be a little bit dicey. So I'm okay with us saying that, but I would want some good wording going to the working group before, because I'm pretty sure there is not going to be consensus in the working group, or not easy consensus. There might be consensus. I mean, sometimes we hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but I don't think there will be easy consensus on here's a definition and here's how it might change in the future. So either we say things have been added in some people's mind or something like that, but saying this definition is going to change, I think makes it hard for us to write 8499 bits. But you know, the working group chairs might come up with some good words that the working group can agree on that.
I'm not saying that it will change. I'm just, you know, I'm leaving myself open, right? I'm in that regard, and to sort of, you know, maybe we'll get a really good explanation, you know, reasoning why we should do that sort of thing.
Yeah. I gotta say, I agree with Paul on this, Tim, and you know, obviously it's up to the working group. But I think that we've already made 8499 deliberately a work in progress, and we have set the precedent that we'll update it as needed. So I think that's all we really need to say about the future. And I think further speculation will just end up confusing people. But that's just, you know, no hats. That's a personal opinion.
Thank you. So, Dwayne, please go ahead.
I'm struggling a little bit with the idea that we need to get this definition exactly right, because I mean, I think necessary versus useful here is a very subtle distinction, and I'm not sure it matters a lot in terms of the definition. What really matters is how the protocol behaves, and you know, whether or not a particular RI type is considered glue or not. And that's, you know, that's something that can only happen further down the road as new RR types become better defined, or their use is better specified.
Okay.
Yes, I fully agree.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. There's some homework for the DNSOP chairs here to formulate the correct questions to the working group. But I think it's clear. Then I think
one more slide. I think
slide we have, yeah. The definition of sibling glue. Well, yeah, there have been also, of course, it's more broader definition, probably also in the other in glue not optional draft. Actually, this is just this is wording from Tony, but I think the discussion we just had about necessary versus useful interpretation, I think it's very similar to the discussion we just had as for in-domain glue. Paul, please speak up.
Clear, we don't actually define sibling glue. We define sibling domain name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
In a quick look that I'm doing on glue is not optional, I believe that they also, so in glue is not optional, section 2.2 is glue for sibling domain name server. That may make this discussion a little bit easier. I'm not sure. Dwayne would be able to talk more about that.
Glue's on optional draft. I think we're at a point now where we very carefully use the phrase, you know, glue for sibling domain name servers and glue for domain name servers. So, yeah, so calling it sibling glue is just kind of a shortcut, but it's bad. It's bad practice.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So this concludes. So this this concludes. So this is we don't use this definition, and it's indeed glue for sibling domain name servers. Okay. Make some notes here. Then this concludes the slide set and all the discussion points. I'll first question to Paul and then later to the working group. If there are any other things to discuss related to the RFC 8499. Paul.
No,
No, you're fine. Okay.
We're good. I mean, look, once we have a working group last call, people are going to pick out things from other parts. But unless Kazunori speaks up, I believe we are at top of list. That is, we've been keeping little notes in the document, and we have no little notes at the moment. Kazunori, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
And Paul, if I may ask a question of you two.
Yeah.
In sort of the actions that we're sort of the chairs we're gonna put together is we'll do some text or consensus around the Bellingwick discussion, making that a more historical thing, but we'll leave the in-domain and sibling domain definitions as the more sort of currently formal side of things, but we'll just drop the in Bellingwick part. Is I believe
or make it historic. Yeah.
Or make it historic, yes.
It's not a question.
Okay.
That is what I've got written down, and if that seems totally off base, someone should just speak up and say so.
And again, it's not up for Kazunori and I to be deciding that. It would really be once you bring it to the working group and get a consensus call. And again, the best detectors of this will probably be the long list of authors on glue is not optional. So you might even rope them in to make sure that they agree that once you're done with the consensus call, that they're good.
Yes, agreed. Okay. And Kazunori brought up the out of bailiwick, which I did not mention, and he is right. They are all exclusive. In domain, sibling, and out of bailiwick are exclusive terms.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Agreed. Okay. Thank you. To the working group, to the participants, any comments, things you think we missed, or well, we missed discussing, we didn't discuss yet? No. Okay. Thank you.
I captured a bunch of this in the minutes, and I'm going to grab all the chat comments as well, because that stuff is really that's going to be really useful in the minutes as well. For those of us who don't like talking. So thank you, Kazunori, for keeping up on that. Perfect. And so we've got some work to do this afternoon, or at least I do. I'll start working on that, and Benno, we'll pick it up in the morning.
We'll talk tomorrow.
We have a chairs meeting in the morning. So.
Yep. Excellent. So yeah, we spent more than 50. We spent 55 minutes on this topic, so that's good. So we need it this time. It's close to the hour. I think we should. Well, it's a little bit up to the working group, the participants. Do people have time for informal chat on Alt TLD for clarification of issues, etc.?
No.
I think it's too short time, and people
Sorry,
have other.
Yeah, Benno. Keep in mind that we've got a draft message from the chairs to go to the mailing list. In the near future, frankly, it should have gone while I was busy being jet lagged instead, but that will be appearing on the list. And one of the things we're going to have to try to do is make sure that we don't continue to revisit things we know we can't get consensus on, and see what we can carve out that will be useful to pursue. So watch for that. And but I agree, there's not really time for it at the moment.
No, thank you.
So we will.
You're right.
Pick it up in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. Then I will close the session. Thank you all for your time, for your input, your participation. Really, really appreciate it. And we can go forward with the RFC 8499 bis and also with the glue not optional draft. So that's it's a good result for today. Thank you very much. and well, on the mailing list, and hopefully see you either remote or in person in London for the IETF in November. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks all.